Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the La Colina Wash Process Guatemala from The Barn. And there's the bag right there. And The Barn, based out of Berlin, Germany, and they were a suggestion to us by Christopher, so shout outs to and thank you to Christopher for the suggestion. This is their second time appearing on the channel, having previously reviewed a natural processed Costa Rican, which we got as part of a European subscription service box. And as a result, it was a cup of coffee that I probably wouldn't have picked out myself, given that I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of natural processed Costa Rican coffees to begin with. So seeing a local coffee shop carrying the Barn's coffee was really nice, as it gave me an opportunity to purchase something that was maybe a little bit more my flavor profile. This is a very safe sounding coffee, but we will see if that ended up being the case. This right here is day 26 of this coffee. The recipe we went with for this coffee was the Barn's recipe, a 15.15 to 1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 94 degrees Celsius, which is a little cooler than typical for something this light, but it worked quite well, so we continued with it. And the grind setting is kind of interesting. So since we went with the Chemex, it's a little bit more of a medium grind. However, I found these to be better with a slightly more coarse, so a little bit more medium coarse with the grind setting for this one. And the Barn, as alluded to, is a European light for the roast profile. That out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. So day 14, first impression, and I was afforded the luxury of actually being able to wait and rest the proper 2 weeks. The cup was marked by something other than its flavor profile from that first impression, and that was the absurdly clean cup that it was. I can't recall a standard wash processed Guatemalan coffee being this clean. Even the wash processed Guatemalan geishas rarely come off this clean, so I was thoroughly impressed with just how much clarity there was in this cup of coffee. And the clarity was pointing towards a very distinct milk chocolate base, which is not too surprising given what this cup of coffee is. But given how much of an importance I place on clarity, this left a super positive first impression. Day 16, ran it through the V60, and it was a little bit more of a classic Guatemalan cup in this sense, as it didn't have quite the same level of clarity, but there was a little bit more of the pronounced milk chocolate aspect to this cup of coffee, with some slight nuttiness and just an overall slightly less clean cup. So on the sweeter candy bar side of things, but not quite as good in this brew method, and the Chemex, one of the things it does is accentuate the clarity. So I think that kind of helped, given that this was a super clean cup of coffee. It just kind of helped it push it over that mark to being a really, really clean cup of coffee. Day 18, back through the Chemex and was seeing similar results as I had on the first day, milk chocolate based yet again, with a fair bit of this slightly vanilla attribute to it, slight bit of nuttiness, chocolate bar reminiscent yet again. And it gets kind of tricky to maybe try to pinpoint exactly which chocolate bar this coffee is, because I think the three things it has is milk chocolate, obviously, there's a little bit of nougat, and then there's a little bit of nuttiness to it. And there's no caramel, very little of it anyway, so it doesn't necessarily remind me of maybe a Snickers or a Milky Way, but I can't think if there's any chocolate bar that's really like this cup of coffee. Back on track, day 20, back through the V60, adjusted to the Barn's recipe, and I saw really significant improvement when brewed with their recipe, and that would make a lot of sense given that they should know their coffee better. And what I noticed was, again, that clear milk chocolate bar base. However, through the V60 at this point, it was almost just as clear as it was through the Chemex, so huge improvements there. Slightly nutty and vanilla, and yeah, just really positive. Another nice day of this coffee. Day 22, again through the Chemex, this time with the Barn's recipe for the Chemex, and they both worked better with the Barn's recipe, so I think the Barn's recipe is really good for their coffees, as it should be. But improved results as the clarity is seemingly through the roof. I can't express just how clean this cup of coffee was. It made it a very easy review, because I didn't have to work too hard to try to figure out flavor profiles of this cup of coffee. They were just so there, pronounced in your face, and prominent that you didn't really have to work hard for it. Slight bit of this subtle red fruit, citrus to complement a very pretty candy bar-like cup, but once again, just super straightforward. Day 24, another day of seemingly inexplicably clean chocolate bar-like cup yet again. The cup is exceptionally well structured, and that's one thing I want to get across, is that it initially starts out with this chocolate base, initially complemented by a slight bit of nuttiness, before cooling off and settling into a slight citrus, a slight berry, and then finishing off into this floral honey-like cup. All of these things are just so clean and pronounced that it doesn't make it any difficult to pick those things out. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And of course we have to highlight the one level 5 there, which is the cleanliness. And as I kind of alluded to, I can't remember the last time a wash processed Guatemalan was this clean. That actually does justify the level 5 mark. This is a super, super clean cup of coffee. Then we have 2 level 4s, the sweetness. It still maintains a lot of sweetness, so that's a huge selling point to me as well. And then the chocolate at a level 4, if I was really pushing it, I could push it all the way up to a level 5. It's on the higher side of the level 4, but I felt maybe a little bit more comfortable with it at that level 4, as there have been some coffees that are maybe too obnoxiously chocolate forward. Other things worth noting, we have a bunch of level 3s. The finish is at a level 3, which is a little lower for finish than I have for most coffees, but it's a very clean and even finish, and such a nice finish that I don't mind it being there whatsoever. I don't think it's a knock on this coffee in any sense. Acidity level 3, it's still a super light cup of coffee, so it's still gonna have a fair bit of that. Florality, saltiness, berry fruit, and citrus, I put those all at a level 3 because even though they're a little bit more subtle, all of those things, the floral honey, the nuttiness, the slight citrus, and the slight berry, they are so clean that I feel like it justified bumping them up a little bit more all to that level 3 because they were just so easy to differentiate and distinguish. Body, level 3, slight bit of some other things, but for the most part, I really like the way that this tasting wheel looks. I think this was one of the easiest tasting wheels to ever make, given just how clean it was. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. So obviously it's super positive for 2 major factors. The first being the clarity, which I've been focusing on so much throughout this video. Second being the sweetness, but it does raise a really important question. Is the ceiling kind of really low for these sort of coffees? Because I can't imagine many more wash processed Guatemalans, standard wash processed Guatemalans being better than this one. And this is really, really good, but can it really compete with your, well, wash processed Panamanian Geishas, your Lady Bermuda's coffees of the world? Because I feel like the ceiling is kind of low for these coffees, because this is kind of as good as I could imagine any sort of standard Guatemalan being. So huge credit to the barn for this. I think there's an outside chance it could finish in my top 10 coffees of the year just because of how well structured it is. But for the most part, it's not overly exciting. It's just exciting for one reason, and that's that it's exceptionally clean. So very interesting review, I would say. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you've never actually had a lighter Guatemalan coffee, I think that they're great. When I'm kind of looking back at some of the lighter Guatemalan coffees we've had, one from the Coffee Collective and one from Kafa, both featured in our Cafe Box Advent Calendar series, I have really positive things to say about them. I really love the way light roasted Guatemalans turn out. They are really nice cups of coffee. They have this super clean and wonderful chocolate base to them, and this is another example of it, but this is probably the best of those 3, which is actually saying quite a bit. So very milk chocolate forward cup, very sweet cup, and some subtle other flavors that should be pretty easily detected. Keep in mind, of course, the light profile, but for the most part, I think that's kind of the way I should leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. Enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the La Colina wash processed Guatemala from the barn. Thank you for watching.